Creating loaders is actually pretty simple. We start off by creating an integer constant for a loader ID. Then we implement the loader callbacks. Finally, we initialize the loader with the loader manager. Let's take a look at what we do to replace our async task with an async task loader in the second GitHub Query exercise. The first task is to have main activity implement the loader manager.loader callbacks with type string. We'll import the class, and then have Android Studio override the rest of the loader callbacks for us. Then we create the GitHub search loader constant int to uniquely identify the loader. Next, we'll remove the call to execute the async task. Since loaders take an Android bundle as their argument, we'll create a bundle that contains our search query as search query URL extra. Then we fill in those loader callbacks, beginning with onCreateLoader. We'll return a new async task loader with type string, and let Android Studio import the class, as well as override the required load in background for us. We'll override onStartLoading. If the argument bundle is null, we'll just return. We'll set the args to final in onCreateLoader so we can access them from our inner class function. Then we'll move the code from onPreExecute to onStartLoading to set the loading indicator to visible. Next, we'll fill in load in background, which I've already had Android Studio override. First, we'll get the string for our URL from the bundle we just created. And if the URL is null or empty, we'll return null. Next, we'll copy the try-catch block from the async tasks due in background to load in background. And we'll fix things up to make it compile, creating a new URL from our string, and passing it to our getResponse function. Finally, if we get an exception, we just return null. Next, we copy the code from onPostExecute to onLoadFinished. After all, if the user didn't enter anything, there's nothing to search for. So we want the error message to work the same way it did before. Finally, we use the loader manager to run our loader within Make GitHub Search Query. We begin by getting the support library version of the loader manager. Then we try to get our loader. If the loader doesn't exist, we initialize it. Otherwise, we restart it. This is different from the traditional loader flow because we only execute the loader after the user hits the query button rather than when the activity is created. Also note that technically we don't have to do this because restart loader will create the loader if it doesn't yet exist, but this makes the code a bit clearer. Finally, we'll remove the code that retrieves and displays the JSON from the saved instance state, and the code that persists the JSON, since the loader will handle that for us.